The key turned in the lock with that familiar click that used to mean home. Now it just meant another day pretending everything was fine. I pushed open the door to our downtown apartment, camera bag heavy on my shoulder, expecting the usual silence that greeted me after a long shoot. Instead, I heard laughter. Wine-soaked, careless laughter that made my stomach clench. "Oh my God, Jules, you're terrible," Tess's voice carried from the living room, followed by the clink of glasses. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I should have announced myself, should have walked right in like any normal husband coming home to his wife and her best friend having drinks. But something in her tone stopped me cold. There was a breathless quality to it, an intimacy that felt wrong. "I'm serious, though," Jules was saying, her voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper women use when they're sharing secrets. "You have to tell me everything. Did Brian really do that thing with his tongue?" My hand froze on the doorknob. Brian. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. "Jules!" Tess giggled, but it wasn't the embarrassed giggle of someone being inappropriate. It was the pleased giggle of someone enjoying the attention. "I can't believe you want details." "Come on, I'm living vicariously here. My private life is lifeless than disco. At least one of us should be having fun." I pressed myself against the wall, my photographer's instincts kicking in. Stay quiet, stay hidden, capture the moment before it changes. "Fine," Tess said, and I could hear her settling back into the couch cushions. "But you cannot tell anyone. I mean it. Cross my heart and hope to die. Now spill." There was a pause, the kind pregnant with anticipation. Then Tess's voice, lower now, more intimate. "He's incredible, Jules. I mean, Omar's sweet and all, but Brian. God, the things he does to me." The words hit me like physical blows. Omar's sweet and all, like I was some consolation prize, some participation trophy in the game of her life. "Details, woman. I need details." "Well," Tess drew out the word, clearly enjoying herself. "Last Tuesday, when Omar was at that wedding shoot upstate, Brian came over around noon. I didn't want to hear more. Every fiber of my being screamed to walk away, to leave, to pretend this conversation wasn't happening. But I couldn't move. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. He brought lunch from that expensive place downtown, you know the one? And we were eating on the couch, and he put his hand on my thigh and said he'd been thinking about me all morning." "Oh my God, yes. Then what?" "Then he kissed me, and Jules, I swear it was like something out of a movie. He picked me up and carried me to the bedroom, and let's just say we never finished lunch." They both dissolved into laughter, the kind of laughter that comes from shared secrets and too much wine. I stood there in my own hallway, listening to my wife describe her affair like it was the plot of some romantic comedy. "How long has this been going on?" Jules asked. "About 3 months now. Ever since that company party where Omar couldn't make it because of that gallery opening." 3 months. 3 months of coming home to her smiles, her kisses, her asking about my day while she was living this double life. 3 months of me being the fool. And Omar has no idea? None whatsoever. He's so wrapped up in his photography, he barely notices when I'm here, let alone when I'm not. That stung worse than the rest of it, because it was true. I had been wrapped up in work, chasing the perfect shot, building my reputation as the go-to photographer for the city's elite. I'd been so focused on capturing other people's moments that I'd missed the destruction of my own life. "What about Brian's wife?" Jules asked. "What about her? She's got her yoga classes and her book club. She's probably happier with him out of her hair." "Tess, you're terrible, but I'm so jealous. When's the last time a man looked at me like I was the only woman in the world?" "Well, if you're really that desperate, Brian's got this friend Marcus." I'd heard enough. More than enough. I backed away from the door as quietly as I could, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my keys. The hallway felt like it was closing in on me, the walls pressing closer with each breath. Outside, the October air hit my face like a slap. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the building that housed my life, my marriage, my complete and utter humiliation. Other people walked by on the sidewalk, living their normal lives, while mine crumbled around me. Brian. I knew exactly who he was. Brian Kellerman, some hotshot tech executive who'd made a fortune developing apps that helped people cheat more efficiently. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was married to a quiet woman named Linda who'd hired me to photograph their anniversary party just 6 months ago. I'd spent an evening capturing their seemingly perfect marriage while he was planning to destroy mine. My phone buzzed, a text from Tess. "Hey babe, having drinks with Jules. Don't wait up if you're working late. Love you." Love you. The words that used to warm my heart now felt like acid in my throat. I started the car and drove. Not home, not to the studio, just drove through the streets of our small city while my mind raced. 27 years old, and I thought I'd found my person. Tess Morgan, now Tess Chen, the woman who'd laughed at my terrible jokes and supported my dreams of making it as a photographer. The woman who'd stood by me through the lean years when wedding gigs barely paid the bills. Except she hadn't stood by me. She'd been standing somewhere else entirely. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Mickey's bar, I'd made my decision. Not about revenge, that would come later. But about the immediate future. About tonight. Mickey's was the kind of dive bar that served as a second home to people who needed somewhere to think. Dark wood, darker beer, and bartenders who understood that sometimes a man needed to drink in silence. I ordered a whiskey and pulled out my phone. First, I called my bank. Hi, this is Omar Chen. I need to transfer some funds and change some account access. The customer service representative was helpful and efficient. Within 10 minutes, I'd moved half our joint savings into a new account that only I could access. Not theft, I'd earned that money too. Just a precaution. Next, I called a locksmith. I need my locks changed tonight. Emergency service. That'll cost extra, sir. I don't care what it costs. Then I called my lawyer, David Brennan, a guy I'd photographed a dozen weddings for over the years. We'd become friends, bonding over our shared appreciation for single malt scotch and the absurdities of human nature. Omar, it's kind of late, man. Everything okay? I need divorce papers drawn up. Tonight, if possible. There was a pause. Jesus, what happened? I'll explain later. Can you do it? Yeah, I can do it. Come by the office in an hour. I finished my whiskey and headed back out into the night. The locksmith was already at the apartment building, a grizzled guy named Pete who asked no questions and worked fast. Within 30 minutes, Tess's keys would be useless. David's office was in one of those converted brownstones downtown, the kind of place that screamed serious lawyer without being pretentious about it. He was waiting for me with coffee and a concerned expression. Talk to me, he said. I told him everything, the conversation I'd overheard, the 3 months of lies, the casual way she'd dismissed our marriage as an afterthought. David listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. This Brian guy, you said his last name is Kellerman? Yeah. Why? I know him. Or rather, I know his reputation. He's been through 2 divorces already, both messy. Guy's got a pattern. Great. So I'm just the latest in a long line of idiots. You're not an idiot, Omar. You're a guy who trusted his wife. That's not stupidity. That's marriage. David worked quickly, pulling up forms on his computer and filling in the details. No-fault divorce, irreconcilable differences, division of assets. The paperwork that would officially end my marriage fit on 3 sheets of paper. You want me to serve her, or do you want to do it yourself? I'll handle it. By the time I got back to the apartment, it was nearly midnight. The locksmith had left the new keys with the building super, along with a note that the work was completed. I rode the elevator up to the 4th floor, my heart pounding with each passing floor. The apartment was dark. Tess's purse was on the kitchen counter next to an empty wine bottle and 2 glasses. Evidence of her evening with Jules, discussing my inadequacies and her exciting new romance. I left the divorce papers on the bathroom mirror, held in place with a piece of tape, right where she'd see them first thing in the morning. Then I packed a bag with enough clothes for a few days and headed for the door. But I stopped at the kitchen counter, looking at those wine glasses. In the dim light from the street, they looked like props from a crime scene. Evidence of betrayal, casual and cruel. I pulled out my camera and took a picture, the first of many I'd be taking in the coming days. The studio felt different at 6 in the morning. Quieter, more honest somehow. I'd spent the night on the couch in my office, staring at the ceiling and planning my next moves. Sleep was impossible anyway. My phone had been buzzing since dawn. 12 missed calls from Tess, 6 from Jules, and a handful of texts that progressed from confused to angry to desperate. Omar, where are you? This isn't funny. Call me back. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. Please just come home so we can work this out. I deleted them without reading the rest. There was nothing to work out. No misunderstanding to clarify. I'd heard her perfectly clearly. Brady showed up at 8, carrying coffee and wearing his usual expression of mild amusement at the world's absurdities. Brady Williams had been my assistant for 3 years. Ever since he'd graduated from art school with a photography degree and a mountain of student debt, he was 25, gay, and possessed of the driest wit I'd ever encountered. You look like hell, he said, handing me a cup. Rough night? You could say that. Want to talk about it? I considered telling him everything, but decided against it. Brady would find out soon enough, probably from the local gossip network that seemed to know everyone's business before they did themselves. Tess and I are getting divorced. Brady nearly choked on his coffee. Jesus, Omar, what happened? She's been sleeping with Brian Kellerman for 3 months. Brian Kellerman? That tech douche with the Tesla and the superiority complex? That's the one. Brady was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, well, shit, what are you going to do? I'm going to destroy them both. The words came out calmer than I felt. Brady raised an eyebrow but didn't look particularly surprised. He'd worked with me long enough to know that I didn't make threats lightly. Legally, I assume? Of course, legally. I'm not going to prison over this. Good, because orange is not your color. Brady settled into his chair and pulled up the day's schedule on his laptop. So what's the plan? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Tess's number flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. Omar, please, you have to call me back. I know you're upset, but we can fix this. It's not what you think. Jules was just being dramatic. You know how she gets when she drinks. Please just come home so we can talk about this like adults. Brady snorted. Not what you think? How many ways are there to interpret he's incredible in bed? Apparently she thinks I'm stupid as well as blind. The phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Omar Chen Photography. Is this Omar Chen? The voice was male, smooth, with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Speaking. This is Brian Kellerman. I think we need to talk. I felt a surge of adrenaline, the same rush I got when I was about to capture the perfect shot. Do we? Look, I know this is awkward, but there are things you don't understand about the situation. Why don't we meet for coffee and discuss this like civilized people? Civilized people don't sleep with other men's wives, Brian. There was a pause. It's complicated. No, it's really not. You're married. She's married. You've been screwing each other behind both your spouses' backs. That's not complicated. That's just pathetic. There's no need to be hostile. Hostile? I laughed, and even I could hear the edge in it. Brian, you haven't seen Hostile yet. I hung up and looked at Brady, who was watching me with something approaching admiration. That was him? That was him. He sounds like exactly the kind of asshole who'd steal someone's wife and then want to discuss it like civilized people. He wants to meet for coffee. Probably thinks he can charm his way out of this. Are you going to meet with him? I thought about it. There was something appealing about the idea of facing him down, letting him know exactly what I thought of him, but there was also something to be said for letting him sweat. Not yet. Let him wonder what I'm planning. The morning passed in a blur of phone calls and emails. I had a wedding to shoot on Saturday and a corporate headshot session scheduled for Thursday. Normal life, continuing on despite the fact that my world had imploded. Around noon, Mrs. Fennigan from the apartment next to ours called. Mrs. Fennigan was 73 years old and had appointed herself the unofficial neighborhood watch coordinator. Nothing happened on our block without her knowledge and commentary. Omar, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the building directory. Not at all, Mrs. Fennigan. What can I do for you? Well, it's about Tess. She's been standing outside the building for the past hour, trying to get in. She seems quite upset. I could picture it. Tess standing on the sidewalk, probably still in yesterday's clothes, trying to figure out how her keys had stopped working. She's locked out? It appears so. She asked me if I had a spare key, but of course I told her I didn't. Should I call the building manager? No, that's okay. Thank you for letting me know. Omar, dear, is everything all right? You two aren't having troubles, are you? Mrs. Fennigan's concern was genuine, but I knew that anything I told her would be all over the building by dinner time. We're working through some things, Mrs. Fennigan. Nothing for you to worry about. Well, if there's anything I can do to help... Actually, there is one thing. If anyone asks, could you let them know I'm staying at the studio for a while, just until things settle down? Of course, dear. Take care of yourself. I hung up and realized I was smiling. It was a small thing, but knowing that Tess was standing outside our apartment, locked out and confused, gave me a petty satisfaction that probably said terrible things about my character. Brady looked up from his computer. Good news? Tess is locked out of the apartment. Ah, the new locks were a nice touch. I thought so. My phone buzzed with another text. Omar, this is ridiculous. I live here too. You can't just lock me out. I showed the message to Brady, who shook his head. She really doesn't get it, does she? 3 months, Brady. 3 months she was lying to my face every single day. And now she wants you to be reasonable about it. Exactly. The phone rang again. This time it was Jules. Omar, thank God. Look, I know you're upset, but you're being crazy. Tess loves you. She made a mistake, but people make mistakes. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk, Jules. Sleeping with another man for 3 months is a choice. She was lonely. You're never home, you're always working. What did you expect? The audacity of it took my breath away. I expected her to talk to me if she was unhappy. I expected her to act like an adult instead of sneaking around like a teenager. You're being dramatic. Am I? Tell me, Jules, how long have you known? Silence. How long have you known about Brian? Look, that's not important. It's important to me. How long have you been helping her lie to me? I wasn't helping her lie. I was being a good friend. By encouraging her to cheat on her husband. I never encouraged anything. I listened. And you never once thought to tell her she was making a mistake? Never once suggested she should be honest with me? It wasn't my place. But it was your place to ask for details about their private life? Another silence, longer this time. Omar, please, don't destroy your marriage over this. Tess is sorry. She wants to make it right. She's sorry she got caught, Jules. There's a difference. I hung up and turned off my phone. I'd heard enough from both of them to last a lifetime. Brady was watching me with a thoughtful expression. So what's the actual plan here? I mean, beyond making them squirm? I'd been thinking about that all morning. The old Omar, the Omar from yesterday, would have probably taken Tess back eventually, would have gone to counseling and tried to work through it and spent the rest of his life wondering if she was really at book club or yoga class. But that Omar was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, only avenged. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they did, and I'm going to make sure they both lose everything that matters to them. Their reputations? Their reputations, their social circles, their sense of security, everything. Brady nodded slowly. I'm in. You don't even know what I'm planning yet. Don't care. They screwed you over, and you're my friend. What do you need me to do? That's when I knew I was going to be okay. Whatever happened next, I wasn't facing it alone. The art gallery opening was perfect. Too perfect, really, like something out of a movie about wealthy people with more money than sense. The Meridian Gallery was hosting a showing for some up-and-coming sculptor whose work looked like twisted metal garbage but sold for 5 figures apiece. More importantly, it was exactly the kind of event that Tess, Brian, and their social circle never missed. I'd photographed enough of these things to know the routine, expensive wine, pretentious conversation, and enough social posturing to power a small city. I'd spent the week preparing, not just for tonight, but for everything that would follow. Brady had been invaluable, using his network of art school friends and gallery connections to gather intelligence on who would be there and where they'd be standing. You sure about this? He asked as we set up our equipment in the gallery's main room. Officially, we were there as the event photographers, hired by the gallery to capture the evening's highlights. Unofficially, we were there to orchestrate the most public humiliation in the city's recent memory. I'm sure. I'd been sure since Tuesday when Brian had shown up at my studio. He'd arrived without calling first, strolling in like he owned the place, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Brady had been at lunch, so it was just me and Brian and 3 years' worth of suppressed rage. Omar, glad I caught you. We really do need to talk. I'd looked up from the prints I was reviewing, taking in his perfectly styled hair and his confident smile. Do we? Look, I know this is awkward, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. Really? What part did I misunderstand? The part where you've been sleeping with my wife, or the part where you both thought I was too stupid to notice? His smile faltered slightly. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Brian? Enlighten me. He'd sat down in the client chair across from my desk, crossing his legs like he was settling in for a business meeting. Tess and I, we have a connection, something special. I know that's hard to hear, but sometimes these things just happen. These things just happen, I repeated, like accidentally sleeping with someone else's wife for 3 months. You don't understand. Tess is unhappy. She has been for a long time. She needs someone who appreciates her, someone who can give her the attention she deserves. The casual arrogance of it was breathtaking. He wasn't even pretending to be sorry. And that someone is you? I can make her happy, Omar, happier than you ever could. That's when I'd known that destroying him wouldn't just be satisfying. It would be a public service. You're right, I'd said. I can't make her happy, but then again, neither can you. What's that supposed to mean? It means that Tess doesn't want someone who can make her happy, Brian. She wants someone who can make her feel important, and the minute you're not useful for that anymore, she'll move on to the next guy. His confident expression had cracked just a little. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Tell me, how's your wife handling your midlife crisis?" "Linda and I have an understanding." "I bet you do. Does that understanding include her knowing about Tess?" Silence. "Didn't think so." He'd stood up then, his composure finally slipping. "You're making a mistake, Omar. I'm trying to handle this like a gentleman. But if you want to make this difficult... Are you threatening me, Brian? I'm telling you that I have resources you don't. Lawyers, connections, influence. If you try to cause problems for me, I'll bury you." I'd smiled at that. Actually smiled. "You know what the difference is between you and me, Brian?" "What?" "You think this is a negotiation. I know it's a war." He'd left after that, but not before making it clear that he considered me a minor obstacle to be swept aside. The kind of arrogance that comes from a lifetime of getting whatever you want without consequences. Tonight, he was going to learn about consequences. The gallery was filling up with the usual crowd: artists, collectors, socialites, and the kind of people who attended art openings because it made them feel cultured. I spotted Tess near the wine table, wearing a black dress that I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The irony wasn't lost on me. She looked tired. Good. Brian was holding court near the sculpture display, surrounded by a group of admirers listening to him explain why the twisted metal represented humanity's struggle against technological oppression. He was in his element, the center of attention, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. "You ready?" Brady asked, adjusting the settings on his camera. "I'm ready." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Over the past week, I'd been collecting evidence of their affair, not by breaking into phones or hiring private investigators, but by using the tools of my trade: observation, patience, and perfect timing. I'd photographed Brian leaving Tess's yoga class. She'd started taking yoga 3 months ago, coincidentally. I'd captured them having lunch at that expensive restaurant downtown, sitting a little too close, touching a little too intimately. I'd documented their Tuesday afternoon meetings at the hotel on 5th Street, Brian's Tesla parked in the lot while his wife thought he was in meetings. All perfectly legal, all taken from public spaces, all damning as hell, but photographs weren't enough. I needed something more personal, more devastating. That's where Jules had unknowingly helped me. 3 days ago, she'd called again, still trying to play peacemaker. But this time, she'd let slip something interesting. Tess had been keeping a journal about the affair. "She writes everything down," Jules had said. "All her feelings, all the details. She says it helps her process." A journal, written in Tess's own hand, documenting every lie, every betrayal, every moment of the past 3 months. I'd found it yesterday, hidden in a shoebox in our bedroom closet. Apparently, changing the locks didn't mean I couldn't still access the apartment. I was still on the lease, after all. Reading it had been like performing surgery on myself without anesthesia. Page after page of her thoughts about Brian, about me, about how alive she felt when she was with him, and how suffocated she felt at home. "Omar suspects nothing," she'd written. "Sometimes I think he wouldn't notice if I disappeared entirely. He's so wrapped up in his work, his precious photographs. Brian makes me feel like I'm the only woman in the world." But it was the last entry that had sealed both their fates. Brian says he's going to leave Linda after the holidays. "We're going to start fresh somewhere new, maybe California. I can't wait to be done with this charade of a marriage. Omar's a good man, but he's not the man for me. He never was." I'd photographed every page. The gallery was at capacity now, the noise level rising as people mingled and drank and pretended to care about art. I spotted Linda Kellerman near the entrance, looking elegant and completely unaware that her husband was planning to leave her. Perfect. "Ladies and gentlemen," the gallery owner announced, "if I could have your attention, please. We'd like to take a few group photographs for our newsletter." This was Brady's cue. As people gathered in the center of the room, he began setting up the projection equipment we'd smuggled in earlier, disguised as standard photography gear. I made my way through the crowd, positioning myself near the back wall where I'd have a clear view of everyone's reactions. Tess caught my eye across the room and started toward me, probably thinking this was her chance to corner me and demand an explanation. She was halfway across the room when the lights dimmed and the first image appeared on the wall behind the sculpture display. It was a photograph of Brian and Tess at lunch, his hand on her thigh, both of them laughing intimately. The image was crystal clear, blown up to 10 feet wide, impossible to miss or misinterpret. The room went quiet. "What the hell?" Brian started, but his voice was drowned out as the second image appeared. This one showed them entering the hotel on 5th Street, Brian's arm around Tess's waist. Then the third, Brian's Tesla in the hotel parking lot, the timestamp showing 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. The fourth, Tess leaving the hotel an hour later, her hair mussed, her lipstick gone. People were starting to murmur, phones coming out to capture the spectacle. I could see Tess frozen in the middle of the room, her face white with shock. Brian was pushing through the crowd, trying to get to the projection equipment, but Brady had positioned himself strategically, blocking access. The fifth image was a page from Tess's journal, her handwriting clearly visible. Brian is everything Omar isn't. Passionate, attentive, exciting. When he touches me, I feel alive in a way I never have before. I can't wait to leave this boring life behind. That's when the real chaos started. Linda Kellerman let out a sound that was part gasp, part sob. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Holy shit, is that Brian's wife?" Phones were flashing everywhere, capturing not just the images on the wall, but the reactions of everyone in the room. Brian finally broke free from the crowd and lunged toward the projection equipment, but he was too late. The final image was already displaying. Another journal entry, this one dated just last week. Brian says Omar is pathetic, that he can't believe I stayed married to him this long. He's right. Omar is sweet, but he's weak. He'll probably just accept this and move on. Some men are born to be winners, and some are born to be losers. I know which one I want to be with. The room erupted. Linda was crying openly now, supported by two women I didn't recognize. Brian was screaming at Brady to turn off the projector, his face red with rage and humiliation. Tess was trying to push through the crowd toward the exit, but people were blocking her path. Phones thrust in her face, everyone wanting to capture her reaction. And through it all, I stood against the back wall, taking pictures of my own. Not of the projection, but of the crowd, of Brian's fury and Tess's shame and Linda's heartbreak, of the social circle that had welcomed them both, now staring at them with disgust and fascination. The gallery owner was trying to restore order, shouting for everyone to calm down, but it was useless. The story was already spreading, social media posts going live, the scandal of the year unfolding in real time. Brian finally reached the projector and yanked out the power cord, plunging the room back into normal lighting, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen everything, and in the age of smartphones, everything was permanent. He spun around, scanning the crowd until his eyes found mine. The look he gave me was pure hatred. The mask of civilized sophistication finally dropped completely. He started toward me, pushing people out of his way, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to hit me, right there in front of everyone. Instead, he stopped just inches from my face and hissed, "You have no idea what you've just done." I looked at him calmly, this man who had destroyed my marriage and then had the audacity to threaten me when I fought back. "I know exactly what I've done, Brian. I've told the truth. This isn't over." "You're right, it's not." He stared at me for another moment, then turned and stalked toward the exit. Linda was already gone, along with most of their social circle. The party was effectively over, destroyed by the truth. Tess appeared at my elbow, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "Omar, please let me explain." "There's nothing to explain, Tess. Everyone saw your journal. Everyone knows exactly how you feel about me, about us, about everything." "I didn't mean those things. I was confused. You seemed pretty clear to me." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in desperately. "Please don't do this. Don't destroy everything over a mistake." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. 3 months ago, that face had been the most beautiful thing in my world. Now it just looked like a stranger wearing my wife's features. "I'm not destroying anything, Tess. I'm just taking pictures." I gently removed her hand from my arm and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the wreckage of her reputation. Brady was waiting by the exit, equipment packed and ready to go. "How do you feel?" he asked as we walked to the car. I thought about it. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated, triumphant. Instead, I just felt empty. Like I need a drink. Good thing I know a place. As we drove away from the gallery, I could see people still standing outside, talking in animated groups, phones still flashing. The story would be all over town by morning and all over social media by tonight. Brian Kellerman and Tess Chen, exposed as cheaters and liars in the most public way possible. Their reputations destroyed, their social standing obliterated, their sense of security shattered. It should have been enough, but it wasn't. The fallout from the gallery incident was swift and brutal. By the next morning, the story had spread beyond our small city, picked up by gossip blogs and social media accounts that specialized in public humiliation. The gallery scandal was trending locally, with people sharing photos and videos from the event. Brian's company put him on administrative leave pending an investigation into his conduct. Apparently, having an affair wasn't great for the image of a tech firm that prided itself on family values and ethical leadership. Tess lost her job at the marketing firm where she'd worked for 3 years. Not officially for the affair, but because her boss decided that someone with such poor judgment might not be the best fit for client-facing work. Linda Kellerman filed for divorce and took out a restraining order against her husband, claiming she feared for her safety after he'd thrown a lamp through their living room window in a rage. I learned all of this from Mrs. Fennigan, who had become my unofficial intelligence source. She'd taken to calling me every morning with updates, delivered with the enthusiasm of a sports commentator covering the game of the century. "That poor Linda woman," she said during Thursday's call. "I saw her at the grocery store yesterday, and she looked just devastated, but strong, you know? Like she's going to come through this just fine. Good for her." And that Tess girl has been calling the building manager every day, demanding he let her into the apartment. He told her she'd have to work it out with you directly. She can work it out with my lawyer. Oh, and Omar? That Brian fellow came by yesterday afternoon. Sat in his car outside the building for nearly an hour, just staring up at your windows. Mrs. Peterson from 3B called the police. That got my attention. The police came? Oh, yes. They had a nice chat with him about harassment and suggested he find somewhere else to spend his afternoons. After I hung up, I called David Brennan. "Omar, I was just about to call you. We need to talk." "About what?" "About the fact that Brian Kellerman's lawyer contacted me yesterday. Apparently his client is considering a lawsuit for invasion of privacy and defamation." I laughed. Actually laughed. "He's going to sue me for telling the truth?" "He's going to try. His lawyer seems to think that projecting those images at a public event constitutes some kind of harassment. All the photos were taken in public places. The journal entries were written by my wife and found in my own apartment. There's nothing illegal about any of it. I know that, and you know that, but Brian's lawyer is hoping we don't want the hassle of fighting it. Let him sue. I'd love to see him explain to a judge why he thinks he has a right to privacy while he's destroying someone else's marriage." David was quiet for a moment. "Omar, I have to ask, are you planning anything else?" "Why?" "Because Brian's lawyer also mentioned that his client is concerned about escalation. He seems to think you might not be done." "He's right." "Omar, David, they destroyed my marriage, humiliated me for months, and then had the nerve to act like I was the problem when I found out. Brian threatened me in my own studio and told me he was going to bury me, so no, I'm not done. Just be careful. Don't do anything that could land you in legal trouble. Everything I'm planning is perfectly legal. That's what worries me." After I hung up, I sat in my studio office, looking out at the city street below. People walked by, living their normal lives, unaware that their neighbor was planning the systematic destruction of 2 people who had wronged him. The old me would have been horrified by what I was becoming. The old me believed in forgiveness, in moving on, in being the bigger person. But the old me was a fool. Brady knocked on the door and poked his head in. "You've got a visitor." "If it's Tess or Brian, tell them I'm not here." "It's not. It's Linda Kellerman." That surprised me. I'd seen Linda at social events over the years, but we'd never had a real conversation. She was quiet, elegant, the kind of woman who seemed content to let her husband be the center of attention. "Send her in." Linda entered the office hesitantly, like she wasn't sure she belonged there. She was smaller than I remembered, more fragile, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, something hard. "Mr. Chen, thank you for seeing me. I hope you don't mind me coming by unannounced." "Not at all. Please sit down, and call me Omar." She settled into the client chair, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "I wanted to thank you for what you did at the gallery." "Thank me?" "I know it wasn't about me, but I needed to know. I'd suspected something was wrong for months, but Brian kept telling me I was being paranoid. Seeing those photographs, reading those journal entries. It was horrible, but it was also a relief. I'm sorry you had to find out that way." "Are you? Really?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it, trying to be honest with both of us. "No," I said finally. "I'm not sorry. I'm sorry that it happened to you, but I'm not sorry that you found out." She nodded, like that was the answer she'd expected. "Brian came home that night in a rage. He blamed you, blamed me, blamed everyone except himself. That's when I knew for certain that everything in those photographs was true." "What will you do now?" "I'm divorcing him, taking him for everything I can get, which turns out to be quite a lot. Apparently, when you're married to someone for 15 years and they commit adultery, the courts are quite generous with the settlement." There was satisfaction in her voice, and I found myself liking her more than I'd expected. "Good for you. But that's not why I'm here." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I'm here because I know you're not finished with him." "What makes you think that?" Because if someone did to me what he did to you, I wouldn't be finished either. We looked at each other across the desk, two people whose lives had been destroyed by the same man, united in our desire for justice. What do you want from me, Linda? I want to help. Help how? She opened her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Brian doesn't know I have this. He thinks I'm just the quiet little wife who doesn't pay attention to his business affairs. What is it? Financial records, bank statements, investment portfolios, business documents. Some of it might be interesting to the IRS. Some of it might be interesting to his business partners. I took the envelope, feeling its weight. Linda, if this is illegal, it's not. It's all from our joint accounts and shared files. Perfectly legal for a wife to have copies of her husband's financial records, especially when she's preparing for divorce proceedings. Why are you doing this? Because he destroyed 15 years of my life, and I want him to pay for it. Because he made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting the truth. Because he's a selfish, arrogant bastard who thinks he can do whatever he wants without consequences. The venom in her voice was startling, coming from someone who'd always seemed so gentle. And because, she continued, I have a feeling you're much better at revenge than I am. I opened the envelope and glanced at the papers inside. Bank statements showing large cash withdrawals with no documentation, investment records that didn't match his reported income, business expenses that looked suspiciously like personal purchases. Linda, this is enough to destroy him financially? I hope so. I looked at her again, this quiet woman who'd just handed me the tools to completely ruin her husband's life. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. After she left, I spent the afternoon going through the documents she'd given me. Brady helped, his art school background having given him an unexpected familiarity with financial fraud. Apparently, a lot of artists learned creative accounting out of necessity. This is insane, he said, looking at a bank statement that showed Brian had been skimming money from his company's expense accounts. He's been stealing from his own business partners? How much? Looks like about $200,000 over the past 3 years. Small amounts, spread out over time, but it adds up. Enough to get him arrested? Enough to get him arrested, prosecuted, and probably sent to prison. I leaned back in my chair, thinking. Sending Brian to prison would certainly be satisfying, but it would also end the game too quickly. Prison was a consequence, but it wasn't personal. It wasn't intimate. What else is in there? Brady shuffled through the papers. Looks like he's been lying to the IRS about his income, claiming business expenses for personal trips, underreporting investment gains, the usual rich guy tax evasion stuff. That's better. The IRS takes their time, but they're thorough. You're going to turn him in? Eventually. But first, I want him to know it's coming. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Brian's number. He answered on the second ring. What do you want, Omar? I want to thank you. Thank me for what? For underestimating me, for thinking I'd just roll over and accept what you did, for being so arrogant that you never considered the possibility that I might fight back. You've made your point. The gallery thing was humiliating, but it's over now. We can both move on. Oh, Brian, I'm just getting started. There was silence on the other end of the line. What's that supposed to mean? It means that destroying your reputation was just the appetizer. The main course is going to be much more satisfying. Omar, I'm warning you. You're warning me? That's rich. You steal my wife, threaten me in my own studio, and now you're warning me? I have resources, lawyers, connections. If you keep pushing this, I'll destroy you. With what? Your company's already put you on leave. Your wife's divorcing you and taking half your assets. Your social circle wants nothing to do with you. What exactly are you going to destroy me with? Another silence, longer this time. I'm not done with you, he said finally. Good, because I'm not done with you either. I hung up and looked at Brady, who was watching me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're really going to do this, aren't you? You're going to destroy him completely. He destroyed me first. I'm just returning the favor. What about Tess? That was a good question. Tess had been calling and texting constantly, alternating between apologies and anger, begging for forgiveness one moment and threatening to take me for everything in the divorce the next. What about her? Are you going to go after her too? I thought about it. Tess had betrayed me, lied to me, humiliated me. She deserved consequences for what she'd done. But Brian was the one who'd threatened me. Brian was the one who'd shown up at my studio acting like he was doing me a favor by stealing my wife. Brian was the one who thought he could intimidate me into accepting his version of reality. Tess was weak and selfish and cruel. But Brian was something worse. He was a predator who thought he was untouchable. Tess will get what's coming to her in the divorce. But Brian is going to learn what it feels like to lose everything. Brady nodded slowly. Okay, what do you need me to do? Help me make some copies of these documents. We're going to send them to some very interested parties. The IRS? The IRS, his business partners, his company's board of directors, and a few investigative journalists I know who specialize in corporate fraud. That'll take him down hard. That's the idea? As we worked, making copies and preparing packages for mailing, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but a calm certainty that I was doing exactly what needed to be done. Brian Kellerman had destroyed my marriage because he thought he could, because he thought I was weak, that I'd accept his version of reality, that I'd roll over and let him take whatever he wanted. He was about to learn how wrong he'd been. The storm hit on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the gallery incident. Not a metaphorical storm, an actual weather event that knocked out power across half the city and turned the streets into rivers. It was the kind of storm that made you believe in omens, in the idea that nature sometimes provides the perfect backdrop for human drama. I was in my studio, going through the final preparations for what I'd started thinking of as the end game, when Brady burst in soaking wet and grinning like a maniac. "You're not going to believe this," he said, shaking water off his jacket. "Try me." Brian just got arrested. I looked up from the documents I'd been organizing. For what? Embezzlement. Apparently the FBI raided his office this afternoon, seized computers, files, everything. Mrs. Finnegan called. She saw it on the news. The anonymous packages I'd sent to various authorities had apparently done their job. The IRS investigation had uncovered evidence of tax fraud, which had led to a deeper investigation, which had revealed the embezzlement from his company. How much trouble is he in? Federal charges. Looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. I should have felt triumphant. This was what I'd wanted. Brian's complete destruction, his arrogance finally meeting consequences he couldn't buy or charm his way out of. Instead, I felt oddly deflated. It was over too quickly, too cleanly. He'd be processed through the legal system, probably plea bargain down to a shorter sentence, serve his time, and eventually rebuild his life somewhere else. "There's more," Brady said. "Tess called the studio while you were out. She wants to meet." "What did you tell her?" "That I'd pass along the message." She sounded different. Desperate, maybe. I wasn't surprised. With Brian facing federal charges, Tess's dreams of starting a new life in California had evaporated. She was alone, unemployed, and facing a divorce that would leave her with very little. "She wants to meet here?" "No, she wants to meet at the apartment. Says she has something that belongs to you." The apartment. Our former home, now just a place where I stored furniture I didn't want anymore. I'd been avoiding it for weeks, letting David handle the logistics of the divorce and the division of assets. "When?" "Tonight. She said it was important." I looked out the window at the storm, rain lashing against the glass with unusual violence. The Weather Service had issued flood warnings, advising people to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary. Perfect conditions for a final confrontation. "Call her back. Tell her I'll be there at 9. Brady looked concerned. "You sure that's a good idea? Meeting her alone, I mean." "She's not dangerous, Brady. She's just desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. So do people who've been betrayed by their wives." I arrived at the apartment building at exactly 9 o'clock, soaked from the 30-second walk from my car to the entrance. The lobby was empty except for the security guard, who nodded at me with the weary recognition of someone who'd been following the neighborhood drama. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt longer than usual. I hadn't been back here since the night I'd left the divorce papers on the bathroom mirror, and I wasn't sure how I'd react to seeing the place where my marriage had died. Tess was waiting in the hallway, sitting on the floor outside our door with her knees drawn up to her chest. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile in a way that had nothing to do with her size. "Thank you for coming," she said, standing as I approached. "Brady said you had something of mine." "I do. But first, can we talk? Really talk? Without lawyers or friends or anyone else?" I unlocked the door and gestured for her to go in first. The apartment felt like a museum exhibit. Marriage, American, early 21st century. Everything exactly as I'd left it, but somehow emptied of meaning. "You look good," she said, which was a lie. I looked like a man who'd spent 3 weeks orchestrating the destruction of his wife's lover while living on coffee and revenge fantasies. "What did you want to give me?" She walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a manila envelope. "These." I opened it and found photographs. Wedding photos, vacation pictures, candid shots from happier times. All the images of our life together that she'd apparently been keeping. I thought you might want them, she said. For closure or whatever? I flipped through the photos, seeing our younger selves smiling at the camera, arms around each other, eyes bright with love and possibility. It was like looking at strangers. Is this why you wanted to meet? To give me old pictures? No. She sat down on the couch, the same couch where she'd laughed with Jules about her affair just a few weeks earlier. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. Not the desperate stuff I've been saying since you found out. Okay. I know you don't believe me, but I never meant for it to happen. Brian and I, it started as just talking. He was charming and attentive, and I was lonely. You said I was pathetic, in your journal. You said I was weak and that Brian was right about me. She winced. I was angry when I wrote that. Angry at you, at myself, at the whole situation. I didn't mean it. Which part didn't you mean? The part where you called me pathetic, or the part where you said you couldn't wait to leave this boring life behind? All of it. None of it. I don't know, Omar. I was confused and making terrible decisions. I sat down in the chair across from her, the same chair where I used to read while she watched TV, back when we were still pretending to be happy. Why, Tess, that's all I really want to know. Why wasn't I enough? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because you made it look so easy. Being married to me, I mean. You never seemed to work at it, never seemed to struggle with it. You just accepted it, accepted me. And I started to think that meant you didn't really want me, that I was just convenient. So you found someone who made it look hard? I found someone who made me feel like I was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. And now? Now he's facing federal charges and won't return my calls. Now I realize that he wasn't risking anything for me. He was just using me as entertainment while his real life fell apart. The bitterness in her voice was new. The old Tess had been many things. Selfish, impulsive, sometimes cruel, but never bitter. I'm sorry about your job, I said, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Are you? Really? I'm sorry you lost your job. I'm not sorry about why you lost it. She nodded, like that was fair. I know you're the one who destroyed Brian. The financial stuff, the investigation, that was you. That was him. I just made sure the right people knew about it. His wife helped you. It wasn't a question. Yes. I don't blame her. Or you. He used both of us, just in different ways. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the apartment in stark black and white like one of my photographs. What happens now? She asked. Now we get divorced. You find a new job, a new place to live, a new life. I do the same. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I considered the question seriously. Forgiveness was supposed to be noble, healing, the mature response to betrayal. But forgiveness required something I didn't have, the ability to forget. I don't know, maybe someday, but not today. That's fair. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the storm. I keep thinking about that night you came home early. If you'd been 10 minutes later, if Jules and I had been talking about something else, if I'd been more careful, would we still be married? No. You sound sure. I am sure. Because it wasn't just that one conversation, Tess. It was 3 months of lies. 3 months of you coming home to me every night after being with him. It was you looking me in the eye and telling me you loved me while you were planning to leave me for another man. I did love you. No. You loved the idea of me. You loved having a husband who didn't ask too many questions and didn't demand too much attention, but you didn't love me. She turned back to face me, tears streaming down her face. That's not true. Isn't it? When's the last time you asked me about my work? Really asked, not just, how was your day while you were checking your phone. When's the last time you showed any interest in my dreams, my fears, my thoughts about anything? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. You can't remember, can you? Because I wasn't a person to you, Tess. I was a supporting character in your life. Someone to pay half the bills and listen to you complain about your job and make you feel like you were a good person because you were married. Omar, please. Brian made you feel like the star of your own story. That's what you fell in love with, not him. The feeling of being important to someone. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they were true. Maybe that's why they hurt so much. She sank back onto the couch, sobbing now. I know I ruined everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that losing you was the worst mistake of my life. No, it wasn't. What? Losing me wasn't your mistake, Tess. Betraying me was your mistake. Lying to me was your mistake. Choosing to have an affair instead of talking to me about your unhappiness was your mistake. Losing me was just the consequence. Thunder crashed outside, so loud it shook the windows. The lights flickered, threatening to go out entirely. "I should go," she said, wiping her eyes. "The roads are getting bad." "Yeah." She gathered her purse and jacket, moving slowly like she was hoping I'd ask her to stay, but I didn't. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to salvage from the wreckage of our marriage. At the door, she turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, Omar, you're not pathetic. You're not weak. You're one of the strongest people I know. I was just too stupid to see it until it was too late. Goodbye, Tess." "Goodbye." After she left, I sat alone in the apartment we'd shared for 3 years, surrounded by the artifacts of our failed marriage. The photos she'd returned were spread across the coffee table, chronicling the slow decay of something that had once felt permanent. My phone buzzed. A text from Brady. "Everything okay? Storm's getting worse." "Fine," I typed back. "Heading home soon." But I didn't leave immediately. Instead, I walked through the apartment one last time, taking mental photographs of each room, each corner where we'd built memories that now felt like evidence of a crime. In the bedroom, I found one last thing, a framed photo of our wedding day, tucked away in the back of the closet. We looked impossibly young and happy, like people who believed in forever. I took the photo with me when I left. The drive back to the studio was treacherous, streets flooded, and trees down everywhere. But I made it safely, and as I climbed the stairs to my temporary home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but a quiet acceptance of what had happened and what came next. Tess was right about one thing. I was stronger than she'd given me credit for. Strong enough to survive betrayal, strong enough to fight back, and strong enough to build something new from the ashes of what I'd lost. The storm raged on outside, but inside my studio, surrounded by my cameras and my work and the evidence of who I was when I wasn't being anyone's husband, I finally felt like I was home. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Brian pleaded guilty to embezzlement and tax evasion, receiving a 4-year sentence in federal prison. Tess moved back in with her parents in Ohio, taking a job at a small marketing firm and slowly rebuilding her life. Linda Kellerman received a substantial settlement and started a nonprofit organization for women recovering from emotional abuse. We exchanged Christmas cards, but never spoke again about our brief alliance in revenge. I kept the studio, expanded the business, and eventually bought a small house on the other side of town. I never remarried, but I learned to be content with my own company, to find satisfaction in my work and my friendships, and the quiet rhythms of a life lived honestly. Sometimes, late at night when I was developing photos in my darkroom, I would think about that moment when I'd heard Tess laughing with Jules, describing her affair like it was the plot of a romantic comedy. I would remember the sound of my key turning in the lock, the click that had once meant home and safety and love. The shutter had clicked twice that night, once when I'd opened the door to discover the truth, and once when I'd closed it behind me as I walked away from everything I'd thought I wanted. Both sounds had changed my life forever, but only one of them had set me free.